don't know if the Portal's in town right now or if he's already out of town, Southern California bound, but he and the Ute Zone crew will be at the Coliseum, as we will too, coming up tomorrow night as Utah takes on the USC Trojans. Steve Bartle of UteZone.com. Ute Zone Radio joins us here. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, Bill. How are you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. You in town now, or are you on your way to L.A.?
Well, Porter said don't leave because I need good cell reception, so this is Porter's fault, but I'm still in town.
All right, good. Well, I'm not sure that our cell reception is any better here because I've had you on the phone here before, and it's been awful. So we're in 2019. You would think in major metropolitan areas it wouldn't be a problem with cell phones, right?
You would think so. I just saw something on the news that that Salt Lake City is going to be a 5G test city. I can't wait to be the test dummies for the 5G. So hopefully that upgrades the cell reception here.
Yeah, it'd be nice. So 24 hours and some change out from this game. Utah remains a 4-point favorite in Vegas. I had a question yesterday for Utah fans. What gives you concern about this game, Steve Bartle? What gives you concern about this game? Everything looks like it favors Utah. Utah appears to have the better kind of roster of players, better coaching staff right now. The dumpster fire's been relit down there around Clay Helton. They lose at BYU. And so it all seems like it's chaos, but it always feels like that down there. So everything seems to point to Utah. But is there anything that gives you a little concern about this game tomorrow night?
Yeah, as I've looked into the game, watched some tape, watched some film on USC, and looked at some of the numbers, I think the biggest thing that gives me concern is USC's ability to generate pressure with their defensive line. With J2 Fele, Drake Jackson, it sounds like they'll get Christian Rector back, but they've generated 31 pressures over these first 3 games compared to what Utah's generated, which is just 23. So they're generating pressure, and with Utah's offensive line, we are expecting Orlando Umana and Johnny Maia to play, which will help, but that's certainly something that has been a concern through the first 3 games. There are reasons that they've given up so much pressure in the run game in particular, where guys are shooting gaps and that kind of thing. I do think that Utah will be better prepared for it. But if there's something that gives me concern, it's USC's defensive line. They're not as big as they used to be with Leonard Williams and those guys, but with J2 Fele and those guys, they're quick. They like to get penetration, and they like to make plays. They haven't resulted in a lot of sacks or tackles for loss, but they do generate some chaos. So that's probably the biggest concern for me.
Well, yeah, and their best defensive lineman on the edge hasn't played as much, and that's Christian Reckner. And by all accounts of the people I've talked to, they expect to have him back. He's a difference maker. He had 2 sacks a year ago, and that's why I threw a poll question up today asking fans which players look likely to give Utah the most trouble tomorrow night. Slovis, the 2-headed monster of Pittman Vaughns, Rector, or somebody else. For me, it's Rector. And I say that, too, because Utah's, let's be very fair, Steve, in 3 games, Utah's tackles have not seen anybody like a Christian Rector or a Drake Jackson or a J2 Fele from BYU, Northern Illinois, or Idaho State.
Yeah, that's exactly why there's a bit of concern. It's just an unknown element that we haven't seen with this offensive line. They haven't seen talents like those guys. The quickness, the power that those guys are able to utilize in their game, that's just something that we don't know how Utah's offensive line is going to handle. So that's definitely a concern there. When you look at those receivers, Utah handled them pretty well last year. So it's definitely, for me, the defensive line.
Steve Bartle's our guest from Ute Zone. Here's what I will say, and you watch a lot more game tape than I do. Everybody I've talked to says this USC football team's a terrible tackling football team and was especially bad last week. They weren't great against Fresno State either, and you can run on the edges against them. Hard to run against Tufele and those guys up the middle, John Houston, the middle linebacker, but teams have had good success running out on the edge. That makes me feel good because Utah runs better on the edges, and we've seen that in the first 3 weeks, and Zach Moss, hard the guy to bring down. If you don't tackle well, not tackling well in Zach Moss is not a good combination.
No, it's not. And, Utah's ran a very predictable run offense. They've only ran a handful of different looks, different plays, run plays. So I think that we're going to see some different run options. We've seen little glimpses of a jet sweep option with Vickers and Covey and that kind of thing. I think we'll see more of that, where you can get guys to the edge, the outside zone with Tyler Huntley and the counter stuff. I think we'll see a lot of that. I do think USC is not very good against the run. They only give up on average 3.9 yards a carry, which seems like it would be all right. But really, when you look at what the running backs have been able to run for, they're averaging 5 yards. Tason Williams at BYU, I think, averaged like 5.2 yards a carry last week. And, I mean, Zach Moss is on another level compared to Tason Williams. So I think, Zach Moss is going to have his day. The reason the reason that rushing total looks better than it does is because they're able to generate pressures and sacks, and that counts against your rushing total. So I do think that Utah's going to be able to run against these guys, and it's going to be interesting to see. USC hasn't seen a running back quarterback combo like Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss. They've seen one or the other. Jose Reyna at Fresno State. They've seen two good running backs at Stanford and BYU. They haven't seen a combination of Huntley and Moss, and I think that's where Utah can really take advantage of this USC defense in the run game.
You led me perfect into my next point. In the two games, well, the one they barely won, it felt like a loss, the Fresno game, and then the loss last week. Two mobile quarterbacks who have the ability to make plays both outside the pocket and with their legs gave them problems. Zach Wilson had a good game last week. Reyna basically almost single-handedly beat them in week number 1. You wonder what they do with Tyler Huntley on Friday night.
Yeah, it's going to be like I just said, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this combo of Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss. Tyler Huntley has been phenomenal so far this season through 3 games. We've seen it on Twitter, PFF grades and all that kind of thing. His adjusted completion percentage is 90%. He is, He is like the number 5 quarterback in terms of the PFF college grade overall for quarterbacks. He's grading out phenomenally well. And what that is, that's PFF breaking down his individual contribution to a play. So his decision-making, his accuracy, his ball placement, he's grading out as the 5th best quarterback. It has nothing to do with production per se. It has everything to do with what Tyler Huntley is doing. And he's playing like one of the top quarterbacks in the country. So what that says is he's playing disciplined. He's playing within the offense. He's not trying to do too much. And that's going to be key for him and this Utah offense as they take on, this USC defense. While they've struggled, they've got athletes everywhere. And when you have the talent and athleticism that USC does, we've talked a lot about it with Utah and BYU. More talent gives you a larger margin for error. That's the same thing here. USC, despite, the mistakes that they make, their athleticism covers up a lot of it. With Utah, they're going to be able to take advantage of more things as long as they play within themselves, play disciplined, and just do their thing.
All right, 2 more things for Steve Bartle before we cut him loose and let him jump on the road or jump to the airport and get down to Southern California. It's funny you talk about all that stuff, and I've been been banging the Tyler Huntley drum now for a couple of seasons. It feels to me sometimes like Utah fans haven't bought in or aren't on the Tyler Huntley train. Do you ever get that sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think that is? Is it just the cynicism of a fan base for whatever reason for so many bad years of average to below average quarterback play? Why do you think it is? Because this guy, going back to when he's been healthy, I won't even say going back to last, when this guy's been healthy for the last 2.5 seasons, he's been really good. And it's funny to me where you see so many people being critical of Tyler Huntley, and they almost don't want to buy the numbers. The numbers, the facts, the information that are hard and fast. It's almost as if some people don't want to believe what people are telling them.
It's interesting. As I've gotten into this and, with access on our 24/7 boards across the network, it isn't just a Utah thing, but I think fans in general just have a hard time because they've been burned so many times with their programs, right? You're so invested in the program. It's hard to believe sometimes that a player, especially with what Utah has experienced at the quarterback position this decade, Travis Wilson did some great things, but he also had a lot of limitations. Troy Williams did a lot of great things, but he had some limitations. So I think it's prove it to me, before I actually believe type of a thing. I got to see it before I believe it type of a thing. I think that's where people are at. And it's interesting because, like you mentioned, we've seen it over the last 2 years. He's had some really good games, but I think the injuries haven't allowed it to really sink in because it's been glimpses here and there. And even during that Red October stretch where Utah played phenomenally, Tyler Huntley wasn't posting absurd numbers outside of the USC and Arizona game. You look at the Stanford game, you look at the UCLA game, his numbers were pretty average, pretty, I don't want to say pedestrian, but they were about average. And I think Utah fans, there's just always going to be that, just that pause before they hop on. And, it's fair. But Tyler Huntley, without a doubt, like you said, is playing his best football of his career right now, without question. And if you're doubting right now, don't, because he's doing everything he needs to. Andy Ludwig has been such a boost to Tyler Huntley's game. It's been a lot of fun to watch him.
All right, every air raid is different. The Mike Leach air raid is going to be different than the Oklahoma air raid, going to be different than the USC air raid. I think the best Utah ever played against an air raid offense was that 15 game against Cal with a veteran quarterback, Jared Goff, threw 5 picks that day. John Pease, Morgan Scalley, Sharif Shaw gave him a million different looks. That was a guy that was a first-round draft pick as a quarterback, and he looked thoroughly confused that day. They've also had games where they have struggled mightily. Last year up on the Palouse, Gardner Minshew diced them up pretty good for at least 3 of the 4 quarters in that game. And tomorrow night will be a different beast because Keaton Slovis is a true freshman making his 3rd career start, but he's got dudes around him. And Graham Harrell's is going to be a little bit different than Leach's, which is a little bit different than Sonny Dykes. So what do you think Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw and Colton Swan and Kyle Whittingham dial up defensively? Because we've seen a great Keaton Slovis effort against Stanford and a solid but mistake-filled one against BYU. What do you think we see tomorrow night defensively?
Well, first of all, I think, what fans need to understand is what makes this Utah defense so good is their advanced effort in disguising their coverage looks. You brought up Jared Goff in that game. He was so confused after that game. He went to Morgan Scalley and asked him, "What defense were you guys playing?" And Scalley told him it was just cover 2. Like, it wasn't anything great. It was just cover 2, but they disguised it so well that it caused havoc for Jared Goff. And I think that's a fascinating point. And when you go back to that Wazoo game last year, right, with Gardner Minshew, Utah played a lot of drop 8 coverage that first half, and they gave up 21 points. They switched more to their traditional man coverage that second half and limited them to 7 points. So, there's been a lot of discussion about, well, are you going to drop 8 like BYU did? I mean, yeah, you'll see looks, but you're not going to change your entire defensive scheme just because BYU did it well. If you don't think that USC is going to spend time learning how to better attack a drop 8 zone this week, you're crazy. Of course they are, because that's where Slovis struggled this week. So it doesn't make sense for Utah to just adopt what BYU did. They're going to do what they do. They have the athletes to match up with these receivers man-to-man. They have the defensive line to generate pressure, and they're going to do what they do. But, again, what makes this defense so good is their ability to disguise coverages. And I think that's going to be the key more so than anything. It's not going to be they need to play more drop 8. It's not going to be they need to play more man. It's just simply disguising it, because Slovis has not seen a defense like this so far. He's seen a good pass defense in BYU. He's seen some athletes against Stanford, but he has not seen a defense like this. Utah is going to make life hell for Keaton Slovis tomorrow night.
Winner, score, game ball.
Winner, score, game ball. Utah, I'm going to say, what am I going to say? 34-21, maybe 24, and game ball to, I'm going to give it to Zach Moss. I think he has a big day tomorrow night.
All right. That's Steve Bartle. He, Dan Sorensen, and crew will be at the LA Memorial Coliseum tomorrow night. Travel safe, Bartle. I'll see you tomorrow.
Sounds good, Bill. Same to you, man. See you tomorrow, Bo.
Thank you, sir.